To me, he was just my Uncle Angie. But to the rest of the world, on that September 22nd, now 49 years ago today, back in 1975, he was the Secret Service agent pictured, front and center, in this iconic photo of the attempted assassination of President Gerald Ford. It was the second attempt on Ford's life in a 17-day span. This story by Colorado journalist Kathy Bedell was first published in the Leadville Chronicle in 2007. It seems like a good time to reshare it. Uncle Angie gives the final, all clear. In the security profession, it's called sweeping the area. This activity is performed by the Secret Service before the public events that the President of the United States is attending. It allows the agents to minimize any security breaches in an open, uncontrolled space. After an area has been swept, the Secret Service will give an all clear, allowing the VIP's arrival. For most of Gerald Ford's presidency, the man who swept the area and guarded the 38th president was Albert Angelone, also known as My Uncle Angie. Uncle Angie was not a blood relative, but rather a good friend of my father's. They served together in the Army and afterward were college buddies at Adelphi University back east. Angie joined the Secret Service in 1968, beginning his legendary 21-year career of protecting presidents and catching counterfeiters. To this day, he is still touted as one of the premier undercover agents in the Secret Service, serving 2 Presidents Ford and then Jimmy Carter, as well as buying any kind of contraband available from the bad guys, although his specialty was counterfeiting. In 1975, Albert Angelone was assigned to protect President Ford. It wasn't long before Uncle Angie's keen training and experience would be put to the test, saving Ford's life and perhaps changing the course of history. In September 1975, during a visit to San Francisco, there was an attempt on President Ford's life. While most were ducking for cover, Uncle Angie stands front and center in this historic photo, scanning the crowd for the assassin, pulling his weapon in case of a second shot. While these pictures are proudly displayed in Ford's presidential library in Michigan, there are no pictures of Uncle Angie in our family album. As you can imagine, a man like this did not mug for the camera. But in the absence of pictures, there are other stories, the ones my dad tells that I never grow tired of. One of my favorites is about the time Angie took up playing squash with all the Ivy League boys when he returned from the service. Later, my dad asked how he was faring in the squash league. At the top, he was informed by a fellow squash player. How was that? Well, he scares the shit out of them. Angie would get it in that enclosed squash court and start to act like the wild New Yorker that he was. His opponents would shy away from the play. The preppy competitors would just stand there, petrified as Angie racked up the points. Eventually, I would have my own Uncle Angie story to tell. It was 1985, and I was covering the World Alpine Ski Championships in Vail. I was hanging out by the entry to the VIP tent, hoping to encounter a glimpse of someone newsworthy. Before long, a massive security detail surrounding some VIP came scurrying by. It was First Lady Betty Ford. "Excuse me, Mrs. Ford," I called out. "Can I get a picture?" No one flinched. It was as if I had said nothing at all. "Excuse me, please, Mrs. Ford, a picture?" And then, just before the entourage slipped into the VIP tent, I screamed, "My uncle is Angie Angelone." The entire assembly came to a screeching halt within seconds. They discussed the situation and came over to me. I was allowed to take a picture of Betty Ford, and we briefly discussed my Uncle Angie. Mrs. Ford was incredibly gracious. My Uncle Angie died this past July 29, 2006, doing what he loved to do, fishing on Martha's Vineyard. Even at the end, there was another story from my dad to add to his repertoire. After hearing several times the report about Uncle Angie being found in the sand dunes returning from his morning fishing expedition, my dad just couldn't bear it any longer and finally asked, "Did he have any fish with him?" Yes, he did. In the weeks after my uncle's passing, the news was sprinkled with reports of President Ford's health. I couldn't help but think that my Uncle Angie was probably up there sweeping the area. He must have given the final all clear.